Hi, I'm Katina Anglin, and welcome to A Good Show. Please stay tuned with us here on A Good Show, which will resume right after this very, very important message. Welcome back to A Good Show. So this is the first show since the election, so it's been a whole 2 weeks and more than since we had our annual elections on the 30th of April. Now we empower the duly elected members of Parliament and the Speaker of the Parliament for 2025 to 2029 term, and I'll read these for you. And I got this from the official source. I always go to the official sources instead of media for anything I want to share, as far as is possible. So I got this from the official source, which is parliament.ky. For the information you need about the parliamentary history of the Cayman Islands, you can visit parliament.ky and you'll see the past leaders of our Legislative Assembly, now a House of Parliament, and access the Hansards, etc. So please, if you've never visited that site, or it's been a while since you've visited that site, please visit parliament.ky. Our current Speaker of the House is the Honourable D. Ezard Miller. Mr. Miller, as some of us know, is a very experienced parliamentarian himself, having served this country for decades from the District of Northside. The Premier of the Cayman Islands is the Honourable Andre M. Ebanks. He also serves in the capacity of Minister for Financial Services and Commerce, and he is the duly elected representative for West Bay South. The Cabinet Ministers, none other but the Honourable Gary B. Ruddy, is the Deputy Premier and the Minister for Tourism and Trade Development. He comes to us from Georgetown South. Thank you, Georgetown South. The Honourable Catherine A. Ebanks-Wilkes is the Minister for Health, Environment and Sustainability. Ms. Wilkes was elected to the House through the West Bay Central by the Honourable Catherine A. Ebanks-Wilkes is the Minister for Health, Environment and Sustainability. She was elected to the House by West Bay Central. Congratulations, Ms. Catherine. The Honourable Ralston M. Anglin is the Minister for Finance and Economic Development and the Minister for Education and Training. He comes to us from West Bay North. Out of the District of Northside, the same district with Mr. Ezard Miller, is the Honourable Johanny S., also called J. Ebanks, who is the Minister for Planning, Lands, Agriculture, Housing and Infrastructure, and the Honourable Isaac D. Rankin from East End is the Minister for Social Development and Innovation and the Minister for Youth, Sports, Culture and Heritage. The Honourable Nicholas T. A. DaCosta is the Minister for District Administration and Home Affairs, and he comes to us by the compliments of the constituents of Cayman Brac West and Little Cayman. Welcome to the House, Honourable Minister. And we are so grateful to know that the Honourable Michael S. Miles, who's been on A Good Show before, and who has for decades advocated for the youth of the Cayman Islands, has been elected to the House for the District of Prospect as Minister for Caymanian Employment and Immigration. Mr. Miles, welcome. We have two ex officio members as well, the Honorable Franz I. Manderson, and who's the Deputy Governor and who heads up the portfolio of the Civil Service, and the Honorable Samuel L. Bulgin, who is the Attorney General from the portfolio of Legal Affairs. These are our two ex officio members. Our other government members are Mrs. Julie J.T. Hunter, who's the Parliamentary Secretary responsible for planning, lands, agriculture, housing and infrastructure, for education and training, culture and heritage. Ms. Heather D. Bodden, who is OCI Certified Honours MP, is the Parliamentary Secretary responsible for social development, education and training, and tourism. She was elected from Savannah and she was elected by the constituents of Savannah, and Miss Julie was elected by the constituents of West Bay West. And we can get back to a few comments about Miss Julie in just a minute. But this is going to be interesting, because how are we going to know exactly which Julie we're talking about now? Because we called the Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly Miss Julie for so long, and now we have another Miss Julie in the house. So are we now going to say Julie 1 and Julie 2? We have the Honorable G. Wayne Panton, JPMP, whose MP goes behind all of these members' names, by the way, who is the Parliamentary Secretary responsible for Caymanian employment and immigration, infrastructure, health, environment and sustainability, financial services and commerce. He comes to us by the kind citizens of Newlands. The opposition members, so the role of the opposition is to keep the government in check. They don't have to get in a fight about everything. And contrary to public belief, the opposition is not there just to oppose the government. The opposition is there to make sure the government is making sound decisions, to inquire into rationale and into spending and so on, and to even make suggestions as a better way forward with any plan that the government may have. They are the check and balance for the Cayman Islands government. The leader of the opposition is the Honorable Joy X. Hugh. He comes to us from Georgetown North, which is the same constituency as Miss Romelia Welcome, who is one of the strongest community advocates that I have ever seen. And I just want to take the time right now to just commend Miss Romelia for running for election, and just encourage her to stay in the community and keep up the wonderful work that she does on a daily basis there in her community. The Honorable Kenneth V. Bryan is the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and of course he's returned back to the House by the constituents of Georgetown Central. The Honorable Perlina L. McGaw Lumsden is the Deputy Speaker of the House, and she comes to us from Georgetown West. No doubt, Miss Perlina will be the epitome of fashion to the House of Parliament, as Melania Trump is to the White House. The Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly is a member of the opposition, as is Mr. Royston Tatum Jr. He comes from Cayman Georgetown East. Miss Juliana comes from Cayman Brack East. Mr. Roy M. McTaggart is the opposition member, but he's also the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, who is returned back to the House by the constituents of Georgetown East. So we had 3 East. Actually, we have 4 East, because Bordentown East has also returned its opposition member, Mr. Dwayne John Seymour. Mr. Christopher Saunders is the independent opposition member who comes to us from Bordentown West. And I say independent Bordentown opposition member, as is Mr. Dwayne John Seymour, and also Mr. Ralston Anglin was also an independent candidate. I'd just like to speak with you about some of the most notable persons elected, or their journey, really. Not just on this first election, but to just take a look at their lives and to see, where they have come from and how they got here. And the first one I would like to start with is Miss Julie Hunter. And Miss Julie ran for the constituency of West Bay West. So she was running against the formidable Dr. the Honorable McKeever Bush. And I had said on the platform for Mr. Bush that God would have his way. And I referenced the battle between David and Goliath and how David had been trained to go to fight Goliath. And there were some people, and even Miss Julie herself, because I personally said to Miss Julie that that was not so, that Mr. McKeever Bush should not have resigned his position, and let me share with you why. People were convinced that it was time for McKeever to resign. McKeever's votes were 400 and something. Miss Julie's was 400 and something. I don't remember exactly what the numbers were now, but Miss Julie did not win by a landslide. McKeever had constituents in the constituency of West Bay West, and they were entitled to voting for him. And so he fulfilled their desire of having him as a candidate in the election. But in boxing, if you give up the fight, it's called throwing the fight. You let the other person win even though you could beat them. This is called throwing the fight. In other words, it's kind of not really giving people a choice. The contender is winning by default. And so Miss Julie had to run her race against McKeever Bush, who had 40 years of political experience. Now, Miss Julie wasn't just up against McKeever, but she was also up against the influence that I had in the Christian community. Today I can say to you, as I did say to Miss Julie at the Victory Party in West Bay on the Saturday following the election, which I think would have been the 3rd of May, that she had earned her seat. Nobody, not Miss Julie, not McKeever, nor anybody in our community can say that McKeever gave her her seat. The only thing that can be said now is that she earned her seat. She ran her race, she won the battle, she earned her seat. Well done, Miss Julie. The Lord has had his way. God bless you. Another one that is very notable is Mr. Michael Miles. I mentioned him a few minutes ago. Michael has worked the Honorable Mr. Miles. I have known him as Michael all of my life. So this is going to take some getting used to. Has worked himself diligently, blood, sweat, and tears, to address juvenile delinquency in this country, to address unemployment, to provide training opportunities and employment for Caymanians. And I am just absolutely overjoyed that the people of Prospect were wise enough to send Mr. Miles into the House, because I can assure you there will be a difference in the way that things are done. It will be an outcomes-based ministry, and I just look forward to many, many great accomplishments from the ministry, from Mr. Miles and his ministry, and how employment opportunities and training of Caymanians for employment will actually change and have effect. Between Mr. Ralston Anglin and his former experience with the Ministry of Education. Now, Ralston and the Honourable Mr. Anglin and the Honourable Mr. Miles worked together before the Ministry of Education. This I see as the best outcome for Caymanians for employment training and to address recidivism with networking with the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Honourable Nicholas da Costa, where I think people have a positive impact in our society for rehabilitation of prisoners, addressing the drug addiction problems that we have and other type of problems that we have, because don't think that drug addiction is the only problem keeping people from working, because we also have an addiction to NAU. Oh God, do we have an addiction to NAU? But I think that the collaboration of MP Anglin and MP Miles is going to be absolutely spectacular, and I look forward to a report in the next 6 months and in the next year, and I'm just looking forward to great things. That's it. Another notable MP, and I want to invite him to come on the show to share some of his life story with us, is none other but the Honourable Kenneth Bryan. I don't think a lot of people know enough about Kenneth's journey through life to get him to where he is now. But it has not been an easy road for Kenneth, but he is one of the people who shows that it's not where you start from, but where you are. And I'm going to contact him and see if he will come on and let's talk some about what early life was like for him. Another individual that I think is notable to speak about, and each person who is in the house has their own story, but these are the ones that of the election cycle that impact me most. Just now I spoke about not having a easy start in life, and that was Miss Perlina McGaw Lumsden. And her mother used to pray for her children and name them one by one by one by one, and she used to pray for her children every night. Perlina has a lot of siblings, and her early upbringing was not one of a golden spoon. It was one of hardship and having to apply yourself as an individual. And, you know, to just see where Perlina is now is just absolutely amazing. Congratulations, Perlina, on persevering and coming through, applying yourself, never losing hope, never giving up. Congratulations. I am so proud of you. And even Mr. Ralston Anglin, because getting back and getting re-elected to the House after a 12-year stint is quite an accomplishment. That usually doesn't work for people. You usually do not win your seat back after an extended period and multiple tries. But I think that West Bay North was very careful to be sure that it had representation that it could rely on, considering what it has experienced for the last 8 years. So those are the members of our House. Those are who we have now as our elected representatives. We may not have gotten all that we wanted. Look, it was only 19 going to win. And we may not have got all that we wanted, but we have who we have. And what we have to do now as citizens is we have to come to the table. We have to demand and attend town hall meetings, constituency meetings they're called. Because what is the point in electing someone to represent hundreds, thousands actually, of people, and then just leaving it for them to sort it all out? And there is no job that I know of in the world where somebody employs an individual for a job and then is never there to answer their questions, never there for an update, never gives them any guidance, never shares any of their concerns with them. That's asking politicians to do the impossible. Citizens have to come to the table and play their role. And I said it at one of Mr. Bush's meetings. If you have a special skill, consider donating your skill, even if it's no more than 2 hours a week, to your district council. Why? Imagine if there were 10 plumbers in your constituency and each plumber donated 2 hours per week. Just that, no more. Your district council now has access to 20 hours of plumbers' service, where they can help the elderly and the unfortunate in their constituency to get the services that they need. And it's not costing you a whole lot. It's 2 hours. Consider if you have the ability to teach people a particular subject. Like, I would never volunteer to do math, because that's not my strong point. But if you were able to teach a certain subject and you donated 2 hours per week and 10 people showed up every week, you're actually providing 20 hours of education every week in 1 2-hour sitting. Is that worthwhile for you as a citizen, as a member of your constituency, for you to do to help improve your constituency? I agree with you that it is. So now that we have the government that we have, let us support the government that we have. Let us be present. And let our pastors be at the table. Because you are not put in place by God for you to bow down to a politician and say yes. You have a responsibility to say to them, that is not godly. I have heard that you were thinking about doing such and such a thing, you being the government. And I want to talk with you about it because I don't know if you have considered what the Bible says about this very topic. Just like Nathan and Samuel were to Saul and David, so you have to be to the politicians of today, to the leaders of today, because you have a charge by God to help to provide godly administration. That's your job to do. God bless you as you execute your duties. Now, one of the things, since we're speaking about the election, one of the things I had the privilege of listening to yesterday was Minister Brian's contributions on Austin and Elio's show on Bobo FM about what they call the preview. It is the pre-election economic and financial update. It was published in Extraordinary Gazette 25, Supplement 1. And this document was heavily used in the campaigns, and it turned out to be very unfavorable to members who are now in the PPM, who ran on the PPM platform. Namely, Miss Juliana and Mr. Kenneth Bryan. But at page 6 of that document, it says, additionally, the preview contains forward-looking projections that are based on existing policies, economic assumptions, and known fiscal commitments. But here is what is very important. While these projections consider known risks, Unforeseen circumstances and economic uncertainties could lead to actual results that may differ materially from projected results. Now, let's have a listen to the remarks and observations from the former Deputy Premier and the current Deputy Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Kenneth Bryan, and his take on the new report that has come out since that has turned the preview upside down. Have a listen.
Because if there was a wrong projection, it had a major effect on the election, and that's why we have to get this right as to what went wrong, because something isn't adding up. And I want to go through that with you if that's possible on the show.
Yep, sure.
Okay, so we know that the government and the Ministry of Finance are obligated by law to issue this pre-election financial update report for 2 years, for the year that is current and the following. And to be honest, I question why you need it for the next year, especially with the government will have their own policies that will affect the finances, but that's what the law mandates.
Yeah,
and
Section
in that
26 of the Public Management Finance Act.
Correct. So that's neither here nor there whether it should be next year, but for this year, it's definitely important to know. And ultimately, the report, which everybody's focused on, is that their projections, based on the expenses, based on the revenues, is ultimately the country would have had a $26 million deficit. And that heavily weighed in the minds of the voters of this country some 2 weeks ago. The preview contains forward-looking projections that are based on existing policies, economic assumptions, and known fiscal commitments. While these projections consider known risk, unforeseen circumstances and economic uncertainties could lead to actual results that may differ materially from the projected results. So what that means is this report cannot be relied on because the projections of either the expenses or the revenues could come back different until the actuals come in.
Yep.
And that's where we now turn to the first quarter actuals. And I know if you turn to page 4 of the report, you'll see the dates on which the forecast information were finalized. On the 25th of March, 2025. And the final report was released and gazetted on the 2nd of April. Now, just being the former Minister of Tourism, I know for certain that the financials for tourism would not have come in at all until May the 1st, because the law says the revenues for that month cannot be released or collected in accuracy because they're allowed 1 month after the date, after the month of collection it is due. They're under law, they're allowed 1 full month before they can pay all the bills. So you'll never know what the total amount will be until May 1st. And I know that just from my sector. So what I do also know, if they're doing the economic forecast for the revenues, it's a projection. They won't know the actuals for on the 25th of March for many of the different areas. I think they can safely say they would know what the actuals would have been for January and may possibly be February. So with that in mind, they wouldn't have known what their revenues would have been. And that's why the first quarter financials now come back with a $54 million above projections. So I know that you said earlier, and it's important that we do give the country as accurate as possible assessment of our financial situation now as possible, because the people will rely and hold the elected arm, whether government or opposition, accountable for that information. So, for example, if this report projections by a revenue perspective, I'm not going to talk about expenses yet, but just from a revenues perspective, were off in their projections by the whopping $54 million, that automatically means that the $54 million than you thought you would have had. So if everything else stays the same over the next 3 quarters, you would be sure to say, without any severe economic events, COVID, drop in the economy, because they would be projecting slow season. They would be projecting the last quarter with Christmas, with tourism. They'd also already had the first quarter where all the financial services fees and all that come in. So they'll do their projections. So that would mean if nothing goes off the rails and they don't do anything different, you'd have a surplus of $27 million. That's ultimately what the report would be saying. But projections are what they are. They're projections. They're not actuals. And now that the actuals are in, it's only fair to say to this country that the country would not be in a deficit, because what naturally is going to happen, and all three of us in the room being in the political arena know how the political part of this is going to play out. It's going to say, oh, we came in, we made this adjustment, that adjustment, and we've saved the country, and we're no longer in a deficit. When truth, in fact, is the hard work of the previous government have now put them in a financial position not to be worried about a deficit. Matter of fact, even the second quarter will be the revenues and such will be the effect of the past government, and I suspect that the second quarter will also be a rather positive by way of revenue, and they would not have had any chance to do anything material in that short period of time to say that we were the reason why the revenues were as such. So the question is, well, why were we projecting such a major deficit? So we know that the revenues is $54 million than expected for this first quarter. That's good. This is good. All of this is good news for the country, you know.
Of course.
It's not a bad thing. But the question is, how did we get so wrong in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
On January 1st of 2024, which is the first day of this 2-year cycle, when we, myself, the Honorable now Premier, and former Minister Sabrina Turner approved the budget, and we approved it with a whopping drop of $45 million. Which minister put that budget forward? It's a whopping $85 million under budgeted by two ministers, Andre Ebanks and Sabrina Turner. And we asked ourselves why we're in this position. I'm going to be honest with you. The truth is, you see the former Honorable Premier, Juliana O'Connor-Conley, sometimes she's too kind because she didn't want to bring it up as an issue to say her former ministers under-budgeted their own accounts. And she was a professional about it. She says, you know what? We're doing well. Our projections look good. We're going to be okay, and we're going to make a surplus. The fact that the problem that we have here is the timing. If the election was 1 month later, we wouldn't have been questioning this, and this wouldn't have been a report out there suggesting that there would have been a deficit, because we were confident in our hard work and that the projections were going to come in. One thing you also know, Austin, being a former junior minister, as well as Mr. Solomon, is that the traditional thing that is done in the civil service is this. You underestimate your revenues and you overestimate your expenses, because the end result will always be that you were able to cover everything. It's a conservative approach, and I respect it. But a conservative approach did not help the democracy of this country when the people had a report suggesting that there was going to be a $26 million deficit. When we know, in fact, now, when the actuals are in, there will not be a $26 million deficit unless, which we will be monitoring as opposition, very closely what the government does with the finances from this day moving forward. Because if they do anything untoward, which they shouldn't do until they get their own budget on the 1st of January 2026 is when they're supposed to be changing. So there's no reason right now for altering of any approaches. You notice that thus far, I haven't said anything about capital, which is what was the argument to say why we're in this position is because of the school, because of this, because of that. The reasons why we're in this position has nothing to do with the capital. The capital changes. The capital budget does not change at all. It's the expenses and the revenues that have changed. Either the projections and the projections for the amount of money we were bringing in wasn't enough, or we spent too much on the expenses. And it's not even the salaries, because if you look within the first 3 quarters, the civil service actually did a good job. They had a savings of $5.1 million where they didn't spend or didn't hire as many people as possible. So it's not even the civil service. Now, there was an increase for COLA, which I know and I am confident that everybody would agree was deserving to the hardworking civil servants. But that did not even touch our drop in the bucket compared to the almost $85 million or above in respect to these under-budgeted ministries. So that's where the problem came in. But what I think could have been smart for the democracy, and this is why I say this is a good governance concern, and I'm almost wrapping up now, Mr. Austin. If we saw the actuals by the middle of April, the finance team could have looked at what has come in and could have altered this report to say, you know what, by the looks of it, the actuals are coming in, because this is a time-sensitive matter. You're supposed to be able, by a click of a button, know exactly where we are financially. But there's always a delay on our revenues. I spoke to the governor about this. I said, I think that we need to be more efficient with this, or make sure that the date of the election is far enough away from the first quarter so it doesn't have an effect on the election. Because they could have done a reassessment to say, you know what, 2 weeks before the election, we see that this is a political football, but the truth is, the way the numbers are coming in right now, it looks like they're going to have a surplus in the first quarter, because they would not have known when this report was completed. And now, unfortunately, it's too late now. The people have voted, and they voted for different reasons. And I know that the budget and how you handle the country's money was definitely one of those concerns for why people voted.
Now, what would have been the political outcome if that report had been issued earlier in the year, say February? Remember, this was an unaudited report. And if it had been issued earlier in the year, Ms. Juliana and Mr. Kenneth would have had a chance to properly address this. But note that he said about the education that should go along with this report being released. And I do agree with that, because when you're releasing a report such as this, it should be properly introduced to the public. The public should be educated on what all of these things mean. And, you know, when we think a bit further about the content of that report and the span of which that report covered, I am sure that it is not lost on us that some of the same members of the current government who decried the PPM government following the publishing of that report were the same ones who were running the government and submitting the insufficient budgets for their ministries. So perhaps we should have a further discussion about how reports such as this should be handled in the future, so to minimize damage, especially unnecessarily, and especially because of the way that it can impact the decision that is made during the elections. On the next show, we're going to talk about the recent article by the Cayman Compass. It's asking the question that now that we've had the referendum, which was non-binding, and by the way, the vote did not win the referendum. The no vote was the majority of votes, but it did not win the referendum. The referendum is won when you get 50% plus 1. And if you don't have that, what you have is just a majority of votes, but you didn't win the referendum. But the Compass has asked the question that now that we've had the referendum, what next? Well, the 40% decline in cruise tourism since 2018, if we don't stem the tide now, I can tell you what will be next, because in 6 years it's a 40% reduction. Imagine where you'll be in the next 6 years. And remember that cruise tourism generates over $100 million. $100 million. Over $100 million. Yes, I said it the third time, just make sure you heard it. For the Cayman Islands. We can't afford to lose that money. That money helps to pay for health care. It helps to sustain the elderly. It helps to provide food for children. We cannot afford to lose $100 million. What next? Well, join us in the next A Good Show when we talk more about what's next now that we've had the referendum. God bless you.